I'm Eric. I work for Nielsen and super happy to be here today to join the conversation about cross-screen advertising and media. And you can see here by the title of the slide, I've taken a slightly skewed slant focused on what we call connected TV at Nielsen, also throw in some cross-screen insights towards the end. And so thank you, conference organizers. Troy, thank you for having us here, and really excited to join this conversation and sit on the panel in just a little bit. By way of quick introduction, I've spent the bulk of my career in between management consulting and Nielsen. And my first foray at Nielsen was back in the early 2000s, actually prior to Nielsen acquiring this company, which was a small Bay Area startup called Telefia. And when I was at Telefia, I helped to develop the first ever industry mobile media measurement product, which at the time, we're talking about mid-2000, 2004. Any guesses on what our premium smartphone for testing was at that time? Just call it out if you have any ideas. BlackBerry was our backup. The actual premier smartphone at the time was a Palm. It was a Palm Pilot and other versions of Palm, now since defunct. Anyway, not to date myself, but I come from kind of the mobile pedigree into digital, now into connected TV being one of my strategic focuses. I went off to business school, went back into consulting, went back to Nielsen, spent the last 9 years, and still now at Nielsen, 5 of them working with advertisers and agencies, the last 4 focused on media company clients and special initiatives such as CTV. Let's see. We have a mantra at Nielsen, and it's we're about the consumer first. It's all about the consumer. We measure what they watch, what they buy, and there are a few different reasons for this. One is obvious. We sell largely consumer-based information and products and software. The second one is experience will show that having a consumer-first mentality, really honing in on that audience as your starting point, is really a best practice if you're looking to plan an ad campaign, develop original media content, or otherwise inform a consumer-facing business. And the third reason, which I think is most relevant to this talk here, is that what we found is the consumer really is the bellwether for much of what follows. Many industry trends, advertising included, where the consumer goes, other things like advertising follow. This is an actual chart from a presentation I gave about 5 years ago, and I stood up at a podium much like this one and presented this. And as you can see in 2012, what this chart is saying is that in 2012, out of all media time spent, 12% was on mobile phones. And of all media spend in the United States, only 2% was on mobile phones. So I presented this slide in order to make the point and suggest that perhaps mobile ad spend should be a little bit higher than it was at the time. But at the same time, I went off the podium and then moderated a panel conversation in 2012 entitled The Operational Challenges of a Mobile-First Future, where we talked about things like publisher fragmentation, operating system fragmentation, and my personal favorite, that targeting people on mobile was much harder than PC, because after all, this was pre-IDFA and pre-Google Ad ID. So at the time, it was harder to target people on mobile devices. Well, we all know what happened in the 5 years since. Mobile phones got a lot better. The mobile ad business of Google and Facebook really took off. A lot of those operational challenges had since been overcome. And as of last year, mobile ad spend was over $50 billion. So 28% of total in the US, and roughly on par with the 28% of total time spent on mobile devices. So this, being an old mobile guy and now talking about connected TV, gives me a little bit of deja vu. And so that's really going to be the focus of the talk today. So we're going to first hit on some new insights that we at Nielsen have created using Nielsen information about the connected TV consumer. Then we're going to shift gears briefly and talk about cross-platforms, so CTV in the context of other platforms, and then wrap up touching on Nielsen measurement of cross-platform and CTV. So that's the plan. Before we launch into the consumer insights, I do want to do a quick level set and just define what it is we're talking about today. There's lots of confusing jargon in this space, tons of acronyms. So what is connected TV? So this is how we at Nielsen define it. and I realize I don't want to be controversial. There are a few other definitions, but this is how we define it, and I would say the bulk of the industry as well. A connected TV is really two things. It's a device, and it's a service. On the device, what is it? It is a TV connected to the internet. And I've provided some examples of different CTV setups that comprise a connected TV. So for example, upper left corner, that's an example of a smart TV. Below that, you have an internet connecting game console. And to the right, you have what we call internet connected devices, or connected devices for short. On the right are connected TV providers. And they break down mostly by business model. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Netflix, right there in the middle, they're subscription only, no advertising at all. Many of these guys are known as video on demand players or VOD players. And if you want to get into tons of acronyms, you can call them business model followed by VOD. So Netflix, SVOD. Upper left-hand corner, Crackle, they're 100% ad supported, no subscription. So ad for advertising, AVOD. To its right, Voodoo, transactional VOD. Slang below that, known as live VOD or a virtual MVPD. And to its left is Hulu, who has a hybrid business model of both subscription and advertising, so you could call them an ASVOD. So lots of different business models, but what they all have in common is that they deliver digital ads in some cases, but all of them digital content to the TV glass. TV glass is going to be our focus today. So what is CTV not? It's not traditional distribution, it's not cable, it's not traditional satellite, it's not free over air. Also, that one term you're not going to hear from me today, hopefully, is over the top, or OTT, which is similar to CTV, but not the same as CTV. What most define OTT as is essentially digital video over any device. And that could be a connected TV, that could be a mobile phone, that could be a computer. That's OTT. I'm talking about CTV, digital hitting the TV glass. Make sense? Okay. Recall a few slides ago, I provided that total number of hours that Americans spent on mobile devices. When you think about that total number, you can actually calculate that with some pretty simple math, and that's what we're showing here. It's really three metrics that provide what we feel to be a pretty helpful framework to understand consumer media behavior across any device. Ownership is the first piece. Not to be obvious, but you got to own a device in order to use it. Then once you own the device, you use it, and that's the second piece, usage, what we call reach. We typically measure it in terms of monthly unique reach. Then finally, there's usage or duration or time spent. These are all synonyms. And that is, among users, how much total time are you spending using that device? You multiply all those numbers together, and that's what gives you the total number of hours that Americans spend using a certain device. So let's take that framework and apply that to connected TV. Ownership. This is connected TV ownership. Anyone owns, any American age 2+ who owns any connected device, the amounts to 224 million Americans. That's 74% of the total TV population. So pretty big number. Actually exceeds the total penetration for tablets already, and is approaching total penetration of paid linear TV, and is approaching actually smartphone penetration. So when people say, oh, CTV is just getting off the ground in ownership, not true. CTV, people own the devices for sure. And that's still growing. Grew at 99% year over year over last year. So let's break that down in terms of the most common device types that we just walked through in a couple slides ago. So this is, again, ownership, percent of persons who own each one of these most common CTV device types. And you can see they all hover right around 40%. And they don't add all together because people can own more than one. They all add up in a deduped way to 74%. If you break that down even further, here's what you get by actual device manufacturer. And you can see the leaders: Samsung for smart TV, Xbox for internet connected gaming device, Amazon Fire for connected devices. One call out on Amazon Fire, that number has actually doubled in the past year. That was 7% a year ago. It's now 14%. Highest growth rate of any one of these devices here. And not called out on the chart, but if you were curious as to growth rates of the device categories, any smart TV year over year grew at 26%. Connected device, 22%, and that compares to internet-connected gaming consoles at only 3% growth rate. So overall, that's 19% year-over-year growth rate for any CTV, mostly driven by smart TVs and connected devices. This is usage, so percent of individuals in the month of January 2018 using it. 85% of owners use it monthly. So people have it and they generally use it. Amounts to 191 million Americans. That too is growing at about 10%. If you take usage and compare that to ownership, it pretty much follows the same pattern. You can see the dark bars largely align with the light bars. Ownership on the top, usage on the bottom. Couple things to call out. First, gaming, highest ownership, but not the highest reach, 31%. Highest reach goes to any smart TV, that's 35%, that's higher, dark green bar. And you compare that to its right, any internet connected device, you see quite a big difference in reach, but similar ownership. So some interesting patterns starting to emerge. Smart TV, not the highest ownership, but highest reach. And if you move to the last metric, again, this is time spent among users, different than what we just looked at. It's a different pattern altogether. You'll see the internet-connected devices, which were more over to the right in the slide prior, and now over to the left. Highest bar is Roku. So average of 40 hours in a month for the average Roku owner that person is using that device. Lots of connected devices over to the left-hand side of this chart. So again, another layer to the interesting pattern. ICDs, not the highest reach, not the highest ownership, but if you own a connected device, by and large, on average, you're using it for longer periods of time. And you see smart TV, on the other hand, all the way over to the right in green. Highest reach, but not the highest usage among owners. So you take all three of those together, ownership, reach, usage among users, and this is what you get. This is basically the raw data from that mobile slide earlier. Mobile slide was in percentage, this is whole numbers. What this says is among all Americans in the month of January, people spent collectively almost 8 billion hours using connected TV devices. That's the 7994 all the way to the left. And with all that talk of reach and usage, you'll see that the major CTV device categories, it all washes out, and they're all pretty similar, just shy of 3 billion hours per major CTV device type. It's also important, though, to put this in a broader context, because we are here, after all, to talk about cross-platform. So when I think about cross-platform, I now think of TV as having more than one platform. You have connected TV, and you have linear TV. Well, here's what happens when you add linear TV. This is the linear TV equivalent to that same calculation. Nearly 40 billion total hours for Americans collectively on linear TV. And when you dig into the numbers, as you saw earlier, already pretty high reach for CTV, already pretty high ownership. It's really that average user time spent that's the main driver in this difference. So if you do the math and you take that 42 hours per month and turn that into a daily figure, that gets you to 1.5 hours per day on average among users of CTV devices. Any guesses in the audience of what that same number is for linear TV? So average time spent on linear TV among all Americans in a day? It's 4.5 hours. So yeah, you know, in the age of digital, still 4.5 hours of linear time spent per day on average for the average American. So compared to 1.5 for CTV. We'll get into more of that in the panel conversation. So we're running a little bit short on time, so I'm going to be a little bit brief on the measurement conversation. I'm sure we'll get into some of this in the panel, and happy to talk more afterwards about this. But we at Nielsen have what we call total audience measurement. This is our framework. This is our strategy. And the first thing of what it is it's comprehensive. And you see here in this chart much of what it includes. It's comprehensive in a few different ways. It's comprehensive by device. We just talked about a bunch of examples: computers, mobile, CTV, linear, radio, you name it. It's also comprehensive by business model, by client. We service the whole ecosystem: advertiser, agency, digital media company, traditional media company, you name it. It's also comparable. What that means is that when we measure linear TV, we're able to conduct that measurement in a way to be able to compare it to other platforms like mobile, like connected TV. And it's also flexible. We'll be the first to tell you that many of our clients are pushing us to our limits to accommodate their needs. And we've been doing it, and we've been doing it in digital now for 7 years with the first introduction of digital ad rating 7 years ago, which covered PCs at the time. We've since layered in mobile devices. Last year, we added Roku devices to include CTV measurement within digital ad ratings. And then just last week, I believe it was, there was an announcement during the Hulu upfront with us that now Hulu is going to be including connected TV as part of its larger DAR coverage. So we've been making great strides. We believe in DAR. And then, of course, there are other solutions such as TV ratings, which continues to measure watermark television advertising following the linear ad footprint. And also custom analytics, which is the team that I represent. And we do a number of things to help augment the more off-the-shelf products to provide our clients more custom needs, reach, brand measurement, and ROI measurement for all platforms, CTV included. I just want to share with you quickly a couple of examples. This is a total schematic made-up chart, made-up data, but made to illustrate the point of cross-platform reach, because again, we're here to talk about cross-platform. CTV on top of linear TV. So what this data says is that this hypothetical campaign reached 59% of all persons 18 plus. And you can see TV, linear TV in blue, connected TV in purple, the overlap there at 8%. And I'll point you to the 6% on the right, because that's the figure that I would say out of anything we do in cross-platform reach measurement is the one that we get requested and asked about more by the biggest advertisers in the world. They're asking, is mobile, is computer, is connected TV delivering that 6%, which is, again, is a made-up number? Is it delivering incremental reach? And through Nielsen measurement and analytics, we can now definitively say, at times, yes. So that's, we're really excited about that development, and I know we're sitting on stage with the trade desk in YuMe in just a little bit. They're some of our collaborators and real pioneers in the digital media space for enabling this type of measurement and analytics. Another example, not campaign-based, but more audience-based. All this is saying is that through analytics, we can also measure audiences independent of campaigns. This is actual Nielsen data for all households showing how CTV device users, those households have higher household income on average than the average American television household. And that's just to make the broader point that for media companies, we help those media companies measure and make claims and provide evidence of who their audiences are. And from an advertiser perspective, can help them reach the right audiences. Let me close with one final point. And this chart may look familiar. It looks similar to the mobile one. And I was thinking before I put this chart together, it'd be kind of cool to do the same thing that we did with mobile 5 years ago with CTV. So the left-hand side of the chart is actual Nielsen data. That's an actual number. The ad spend piece, to be honest, not sure I've seen a great research on ad spend estimates of either today or forecasted for CTV specifically. And Nielsen doesn't do that. But what I will say is hypothetically, we can make some projections. And if you think about that, Hulu, arguably the largest next to YouTube maybe, largest ad-supported CTV provider in the world, reported total global revenue, I think it was of $1 billion in 2017. I think it's a safe assumption to say that, like mobile 5 years ago, CTV ad spend is currently, in all likelihood, under-indexing time spent. But what would happen if it did meet 6% of total time spent and also 6% of total ad spend? That would equate to $12 billion. So I think the million-dollar, if not multi-billion-dollar question for all of us, especially those in the room that are trying to drive things like OTT and CTV advertising, is will it get there? And if so, what will it take to get there? And I don't have the answer to that question. Maybe we'll talk about it on the panel. But if I had to make a guess, I think it will largely track a pattern of mobile. The writing's on the wall from a consumer perspective. And I think it's just a question of will the ad dollars follow? And if so, to what degree? So that's it for my prepared remarks today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, we're going to segue into our panel discussion now on this and related topics. I'll ask the panelists to join us. And Eric can have a seat. Let's see. Okay. Finally a full room. Thank you. Thank you for coming. So I'm going to start off and ask our three new panelists just for a brief introduction and explain what your role is in the marketing advertising ecosystem so they kind of know what angle you're coming from. Kathleen?
Hi, everybody. I'm Kathleen Comer. I'm Vice President of Client Services at the Trade Desk. We are an omni-channel demand-side platform, technology platform that agencies and the brands that they represent use to run omni-channel global programmatic campaigns.
Hi, I'm Harris Beber. I'm the CMO of Vimeo. We're the world's largest ad-free video platform. And my responsibility as CMO is twofold. One is to represent that creative community of over 70 million registered users, as well as grow our business of paid subscribers. And so I'm a marketer, but also a supporter of an enormous base of content creators as well.
Hey everybody, my name is Todd Johnson. I am VP of Emerging Technology for YuMe by Rhythm One. YuMe by Rhythm One is a multi-screen video solution for brand advertisers supported by a programmatic engine and performance solution. My role is to understand and help set strategy for advanced TV, inclusive of connected TV for our organization.
Terrific. One housekeeping question. Is Harris's mic on? Did you turn it off by accident? Is the green light on?
Green light.
Maybe we should get him the handheld, just in the interest of time. Yeah.
I could yell.
Can't really pass around a lavalier. Okay. But you guys could hear the others fine, right? Yeah? All right. Eric?
Mic is off.
Oh, mine is on?
Yeah. You see the green light? There you go. It's off.
I'm totally comfortable yelling. Oh, all right.
Now the green light's on, and I think you're going to have to use that. Does anyone need to be reintroduced? Could you hear them okay? They're all good? Okay. Well, Eric, first of all, thank you very much for that presentation. I saw a lot of people craning their necks and looking at the screen and taking photos. I hope you all enjoyed the info. This is the first time I saw that Amazon Fire is outselling Roku. I didn't know that was a thing that had happened.
Well, outselling is not something we would measure, but in terms of penetration
Right.
among Americans, that's based on our panel measurement. That's something that is part of that slide, yeah.
So that is the leader in penetration, but not in usage. Roku had a much stronger usage in yours. What does that mean, that Roku users are using them so much more?
Well, honestly, your guess in part is as good as mine as to the why. A couple thoughts on that. I myself am a consumer, as I am a media professional, and I have a Samsung Smart TV. My parents have a Roku device, and this is data point of one. But when I set up the Roku device and started using it, it was just a really slick interface. Part of me was a little dubious. You got this remote control thing, but it actually worked really well for me. And not to throw Samsung under the bus, but I thought smoother than my smart TV. And as you saw in those total time spent among user metrics, usability could very well play into that. The other piece, which is something that we're more digging into, is there also may be some demographic factors at play. Different people tend to own different devices, not just CTV devices, but really any media device. Mm-hmm. And perhaps demographics and simply the audience that happens to buy one device over another could also be playing into some of the usage discrepancies.
I loved your observation that the TV itself is now a multi-platform experience.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever said that before. That was kind of impromptu. But yeah, I clearly it's the same TV, it's the same glass, but no reason why you couldn't reach, as an advertiser, someone through linear TV as you could through that same exact TV glass through CTV and more programmatic-based advertising.
Mm-hmm. Kathleen, it seems like nowadays when we're talking about connected or cross-screen advertising, we're really talking about connected TV viewership. Can you tell us how connected TV can be used alongside linear?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've had a lot of clients have success thinking about connected TV as complementary to their linear TV buy, because as you mentioned earlier, linear TV hasn't necessarily gone anywhere. There's still robust viewership there, but I'll share a couple stats. I read an eMarketer study that mentioned that nearly 6 million people cut their cable subscription in 2017, and another estimated 18 million people are anticipated to cut the cord over the next 4 years. And that's in addition to people that have never had a cable subscription at all, and also in addition to people who cut the cord before 2017 when that study was done. So I think it just goes to show there are a lot of people who are watching streaming content on connected TV and also simultaneously watching linear TV. I'm a huge fan of The Voice, and that's actually one of the shows that I do watch for
Live.
appointment viewing. But I also, my husband and I have an Apple TV, and we also consume via Hulu on that. But I think that the point for marketers is connected TV viewership is growing so quickly, especially in that core adults 18 to 49 demographic, that if you are not there, you are going to miss out on a core cohort of your customers. You really have to be paying attention to CTV.
I hate that demographic because I'm almost not in it anymore. I don't want to not be the focus of advertisers anymore in the core demo. So the growth in connected is really about reaching younger, more affluent viewers?
I don't think I'd comment on the affluence so much. I don't have as many data points to speak to on that, but I think definitely, I have a cousin who's 25. She and her boyfriend do not have a cable subscription. So again, one data point, but to extrapolate on that, I think definitely when you think about the younger impressionable audience that marketers really want to reach, they are most certainly streaming content.
Todd, do we need cross-screen reach to reach these people? Is it about catching people on whatever screen, or is it about catching people on the only screen that they're on? Like the cousin she's talking about who never looks at commercial TV. Do we need connected TV advertising just to reach those people at all?
Yeah, I think there's an increasing number of people, obviously, that are moving away from linear TV, which has always and will continue to do a lot of the heavy lifting from a reach standpoint. But you've now got a segment of the shopping community that are unreachable that way. So CTV is a tactic that complements the other screens that we're working with. But ultimately, if we start at the big picture, it's about following the consumer journey, mapping out the different touch points they have throughout the day and what screen best can connect with them. And the research that we have seen and we've done in partnership with Nielsen is primetime continues to still be primetime. When you get home from work, you're making dinner, you're sitting in front of the TV and you're engaging with content. What's happened though is some people are watching The Voice, other people are watching Stranger Things, other people are watching Star Trek via CBS All Access. So it's about creating those touch points across the different screens.
Now, when an advertiser takes on a cross-screen campaign, what are they mostly doing? Are they mostly saying, all right, I'll do a buy with this ad-supported network and get some living room viewers? Or how many are really taking a holistic, we have to do multiple screen experiences and follow them throughout the day? I hear about following people on whatever glass they're on. Is it being done that much?
Increasingly.
Yeah.
I think 4 years ago, it was one screen and it was incremental screens. Now, increasingly, the more forward-thinking advertisers are seeing sight, sound, and motion, understanding that they have different impacts and that there's different messaging that works better on different screens based on size and the other elements there. So I think we will see more and more of it. Ultimately, it comes down to the client needs and what their KPIs are. If they have a sense of, this is what I need this screen to do for me, and I see truth in the results I'm looking for, that that's what guides it ultimately.
Not everyone needs to hit every glass.
Right.
I can vouch from our perspective that yes, omni-channel, multi-screen campaigns are happening and smart marketers are following the consumer. Because, I mean, all of you in this room are consumers just as much as I am. You don't spend 100% of your day with one screen. You don't limit your media consumption just to desktop display. Nobody does. So in order to effectively reach your audience and push them down through that customer journey, through the path to purchase or the path to influence, you have to be adopting a multi-screen strategy.
And it's not just from a reach perspective. When you think of all of the preferred outcomes that a marketer is looking for, reach is just one. I mean, there are many others. I think two of the more common, in addition to reach, would be brand impact and actual ROI, sales impact, or if you're a TV marketer, tune-in impact, which is their version of conversion. So I think you have to take account of outcomes. And you also have to take account of costs. I kind of come from an economics background where you do cost-benefit analysis. Those are your benefits. You also got to look at the costs. And the more that as an advertiser or an agency or companies like the Trade Desk and YuMe who are helping them make informed decisions are taking account of those costs and creating the most efficient way to make that money go to work for that marketer, I think all of those inputs need to be part of a media plan.
Sorry, Harris, go ahead.
No, yeah, I think adding to that is not only is audience and viewership fragmented, but so is attention. So while you're targeting someone, whether it's on a connected TV or linear TV, you're also competing against their mobile device that's in their hand, the conversation they're having with their spouse at the same time. So as a marketer or anyone who's trying to reach an audience, you have a responsibility to not only be in the place that they're viewing, but also capture them in that moment where you could get their attention. And while they're watching TV, it might be their attention's focused on their mobile device. So being in multiple places is almost a requirement moving forward because their attention is in multiple places.
Now, Harris, you're coming at this from the creator experience. You're representing the creator here. And you were telling me that having a cross-screen strategy is important for creators as well.
Yeah, it is. In an ideal world, a creator of content, whether you're a filmmaker or a yoga instructor or a business marketer that's using video as a format to tell a really compelling story, in an ideal world, you say, come sit down in my nice branded experience and I want your full attention, but that's not the way the world works and it's not ideal. And so when we empower our creators, we give them the tools to make their videos and stories reach wherever the viewership exists, and that includes publishing to other platforms. So you upload your video to Vimeo, and you could publish with one button your video to YouTube, to Facebook, to Twitter. That's where the audience is, and if you have a story to tell, you want to reach your audience where they are, not where you want them to be, because you don't get to control that.
I don't want to surprise you with this, but off the top of your heads, can you tell us how the viewing has changed since you've been watching? Are certain screens growing in importance or losing importance?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is native viewing in the social channels is growing. If you look at live format is also growing. Mark Zuckerberg shared a stat about Facebook that live video gets 6 times the engagement of static video that's not live. So engagement is also a compelling factor. So that's form factor, and it's where people are engaging with content. So if you're spending time in social and you're scrolling through your feed and there's a moment that you could capture them with video, that's the moment that you have to be there with your video, whether it's an ad or content or story. So again, you don't control your audience's viewership, you have control over reaching them in that viewership.
Well, the Vimeo creator has a reputation of being a little more artistic, some more serious. Do they want to be in a news feed on a social platform?
I think they want to reach their audience with their story that they invested an enormous amount of time. And yes, there's filmmakers telling stories that might want it in an embedded player on their own website, but there's also marketers that are trying to tell their brand story, or a yoga instructor that's making people aware of their content, or a youth sports team that's broadcasting a Little League game, and that's live, and the parent is at work and on Facebook. So it's not only just on a website, it's on Facebook with a simulcast for live streaming content. So it really is truly fragmented, as is the attention.
Okay.
I would underline that, and just to your comment about video, we've seen a lot of growth in mobile video and also in native video, but I think the summary point is video, any video type format is most compelling, it seems.
the central thing
Yeah.
is just video.
Yep, like
Okay.
the narrative aspect of a video ad as opposed to just an image.
So let's talk about what's going on in the agencies to create these cross-screen experiences. Do we still have like a TV unit and a connected TV unit and a social video? Like, are they all working independently, or are things changing behind the scenes?
Sometimes they're working independently, sometimes there are teams that are working in a more integrated fashion. I think, there's never been a time more like now to focus on the consumer and focus on potentially reorganizing our own organizational structures to mirror the way that the modern consumer consumes media. Our team at the trade desk is agnostic, and just as a consumer is going to be as much of an expert in consuming desktop display advertising as they are online video, as they are connected TV, as they are audio. Our team is experts in all of those different channels or fields also, and I think that's a huge asset because consumers aren't consuming media in silos. Perhaps this is an interesting point in time to consider organizing our own competencies around that holistic understanding.
You mentioned the word silos, and that's sort of how we're talking about creating things, right, in the organization, in different silos. Is that getting broken down like I hear about so often, of units working together?
I think there are definitely instances of units working together to share insights, and I think wherever possible, that's important, because just like I said, nothing that the consumer is digesting is in silos. So the more that we can do to mirror the way that we shape campaigns, shape plans, shape the way that we deliver insights back to clients, we should be pushing further and further to understand that holistically, because ultimately the marketer needs a holistic understanding of what happened, what worked, how did that customer move down the path to purchase, how did my audio ad coupled with these mobile ads, coupled with that connected TV ad, how did that all play together to influence this customer?
Todd, do you see that kind of holistic planning coming into play as ad experiences get created?
So I think eventually we'll get there. That's why Eric and Nielsen are so important, because they're probably going to have a large hand in shaping this. When we have one currency with which we transact on, that will drive a lot of this integration, and it will really speed it up. So if I'm transacting on connected TV with GRPs, or I'm transacting on linear TV with, as we say, digital impressions, then we can start grouping this in from a buying and execution standpoint. I think that's probably the barrier, is getting some of the execution piece streamlined and measurement piece streamlined. But that's what's exciting about it. I mean, I go into meetings and I could talk to digital teams, I could talk to TV teams, I could talk to strategic planning teams as well. It still feels pretty fragmented. Even in New York, you get outside of New York and it's wild.
So the holistic thing gets more spoken about than practiced.
Yeah, I think that agencies right now are focused on serving their client needs as best they can, and part of that is anchored in how they've traditionally operated,
Right.
and that's a model that has worked for them.
Right.
So, and that's not passing judgment on whether or not that's good or bad. I came from an agency background. It certainly helped shape my career to where it is, and I think about it fondly. It's just that's easier for the time being.
And you're saying one of the things that will get us to the next point is measurement changes.
Yeah.
So is there something you'd like to ask him for? Is there something Nielsen needs to deliver? I'm sure they know.
What, my one slide didn't answer all your questions?
And I don't want to put this at the feet of Nielsen. I mean, there's an ad execution challenge to this as well. The information that's being passed back in the connected TV universe is not standardized or consistent. So there's a lot of stakeholders in this. That, I mean, when you think about executing mobile, it's Android and it's iOS, and you've got the majority of the market covered, and if they're in lockstep on what's being passed back and forth, then you can build a consistent and scalable business. When that takes effect in CTV, that'll allow us to add measurement to it in a more scaled manner, and then everything really takes off.
Eric, what kind of measurement changes are you getting demands for every single day?
Yeah, well, look, total audience, which we introduced years ago, was in part response to our client requests, which continue, and
Right.
we expect them to continue. In part, it's really our own observation of the consumer. And I think just to concur with a lot of what you're hearing on the panel, we don't see any one platform in a vacuum. We don't see any one business model in a vacuum. And I think that's reflected not only in total audience and our strategy and increasingly our products, like I said, 7 years ago being our first TV GRP-like digital measurement product and continuing to augment that. Are we there yet? No, it's a constant process. And honestly, when it comes to mobile 5 years ago or CTV today, a lot of it requires collaboration of the entire ecosystem. I mean, when you have in that chart with 11 different devices, not including other, and 10 different manufacturers all comprising CTV with all different devices and
Operating
ways of passing
systems.
data, it requires a massive coordination effort, not just Nielsen going it alone. And that's what we've been up to for decades and years in terms of digital. So, we're working on it. And I think I would also point to some of the more executional challenges. Fragmentation, not just in device, but in publisher. I think we started out talking about reach. One of the biggest challenges today, just to take CTV for reach, is scale. And I think your two companies have done an excellent job in piecing together connected TV inventory to reach meaningful scale. So you can trot into the biggest agencies and advertisers in the world and say, I can deliver you a substantial number of unique audience in 18 plus or 18 to 49. And whereas some publishers out there going it alone just simply don't have that scale, even some of the biggest CTV publishers in the world. So I think these are examples of not just measurement collaboration, but also broader industry ecosystem efforts to meet the needs of marketers to make things like CTV and cross-platform bigger than it is today.
Okay. Harris, so far we've talked a lot about reach, but we haven't talked about frequency, which is just as important. Does a cross-screen approach change an advertiser's frequency goals?
In an ideal world, yeah. I mean, you're able to measure when you capture their attention, and then you'd have the optimal frequency, but you don't know when you have full attention. And I think we're lucky if we get these micro moments with our intended audience or the consumers we want to reach. So you have to increase your frequency because their attention is further and further spread thin, and it's increasing your frequency across devices. So that 6-second spot layers up to 30-second spot to maybe a longer form, and the collection of all that media or those 6-second moments or those fraction moments gets your brand message received. And there's an old adage of when I started marketing that you had to touch a consumer 5 times to get their awareness level. Just given the level of distraction, I don't know if there's an updated stat, but it's got to be 10 or 15 times today, because you don't have the same level of attention span that used to exist when there was only traditional formats of print and TV, radio, and out of home. That there's so many more ways that people are giving their attention that you have to increase your frequency to make sure that you cut through the noise.
So you say up the goals.
Yeah.
And then what about that person who's giving it their full attention and sees it so much? Like, are you at risk of oversaturating that person, maybe burning them out?
Yeah, I think that's why it's leveling up. That's where you have to have a cohesive strategy as we think about how we orient our messaging, that you don't want to hit the same message that's stale over and over and over again. Then it becomes a point from awareness to annoyance. But how do they feel cohesive from a brand messaging, that it's an investment in content? And we really think about that as what's the messaging we're saying? How are we saying it? Is it slightly different, but it levels up to an overall brand message? And that's how you could balance your frequency rate without alienating your audience by telling them something different, but all marries with your brand and your strategy and where your company beliefs are.
I will say, jumping on that we have seen research that if you can create multiple touch points across multiple screens, you have a little more flexibility in wear out and a little more leeway from a frequency standpoint. You're following the consumer journey. I think our collective pain points are seeing the same ad on the same screen over and over and over again. That gets smoothed out if you're moving throughout the day and I'm seeing it on my phone and then I'm seeing it on my computer and I'm seeing it at home versus 3 times on my TV at home in one session. So that's, I think, comes back to cross screen. If we can spread out that frequency across screens, we buy more favor with our consumers.
I'm glad you led into that, because I want to ask people, how many people, just hold your hand and leave it up, how many people have had an ad where they seem to see the same product advertised for them across screens in different ways? How many have had that experience where you felt like, okay, I've seen it here and here and here and here? Now leave your hand up if you find that creepy. Even higher, about half. I hear a lot about these ads following people around and that it's smart, but I'm kind of on the creepy side. And I'm like, when it happens to me, I'm like, I don't know if I want to go there now. Like, is there a risk of something effective maybe turning people off?
I think there is, and I think that makes a compelling argument for consolidating on an omni-channel platform where you can actually control for frequency for each of those different screens. Because as a marketer, the one thing you have is the trust that you're trying to build with a potential customer. And if you jeopardize that and irritate a customer or otherwise disturb them from their consumption session, like that can be a real risk. So I think having the control over frequency on one platform ideally can be really, really helpful. And just to put that into perspective, frequency can be a massive headache, because if you've got a 3 per user for FCAP on one platform and a 3 per user FCAP on another platform and the same thing on another platform, all of a sudden you've effectively got a 9 per frequency cap, and it's very difficult to control for that.
Well, and let's also remember that for any benefit you get from frequency, which I'll be the first to agree, from a brand impact and even a sales impact perspective, there's a pretty steep curve up to that point of diminishing marginal returns. And actually, having kind of cut my teeth at Nielsen on the brand impact side, we run thousands of brand impact studies, and wear out is very rare, very rare. It really is 10, 15, 20 plus average frequency, the same exact creative, same exact platform. So if you're going to err, I would err on the more side of higher rather than lower for brand impact. But the point I was going to make earlier is there is always a trade-off. For any extra frequency, you're losing it typically in extra reach, assuming you have the ability to reach additional people if you could. Mm-hmm. So when you think back to that Venn diagram of CTV TV from middle of my presentation, if that advertiser and its enablers have the ability to reach that one additional person on one screen, and that is the key objective of that campaign, is maximizing reach, it is, based on math, going to be traded off with extra frequency. So I think the key is really understanding what the marketer's priorities are. What are they trying to achieve? Is it brand impact? Is it ROI? Is it maximizing reach? Because you can't get it all, and sometimes you need to make trade-offs.
Just like frequency or following people around could have unintended negative consequences, I feel like privacy concerns can make targeting a little difficult too, right? As we get to know more and more about the consumer, even if it's fully anonymized, consumers often don't like knowing that you know so much about them, Just look what's happening with Facebook now. I mean, I know that I get happy when I see an ad for baby products, because I know, good, they don't know me. There's no baby in this house. They don't know who I am. Are you seeing people who sort of get turned off if you target them too well? And what can you do about that? Anybody?
Yeah, I think anyone you're targeting, there's relevancy that's important. So if your brand is about telling a relevant message to the right audience, then it feels right. If there's a creepy factor if you go too far and you know things that you shouldn't know, it's about the value you offer to the base that you're trying to reach, and also telling that message in a unique way that's relative and native to that platform. So if you're doing the same ad across every device and following that person around, it could start to feel weighted and creepy versus telling an engaging story in the format that's native to that platform and adding value, right? I never want to spend a penny on reaching an audience that doesn't add value, because ultimately we serve our creator base. And I want to add value to those creators by building tools and teaching them about those tools that's meaningful to them. And if it's not, then in my mind, it doesn't matter about awareness if it's not driving value.
It really comes down to providing a good experience,
Yeah.
right?
It always comes down to being a customer-centric organization. That's why we've always been an ad-free platform. We recognize the amount of time and effort that goes into the creators creating that content, and we don't want to step on that with some pre-rolled video. We want to have a safe space for them to display their work, and we want to surface, when we reach those people, to tell them about our platform, what are the tools that help them achieve their goals of really empowering them to tell incredible stories and reach their audience, wherever that might be.
Okay, let's
So-
take a little bit, sorry.
Oh, I would just add that that's where we'll see an increasing focus on personalization, certainly for the rest of 2018 into 2019, from a consultancy standpoint, and their focus on helping brands understand that part of the business and the right way to play in that space. Yeah, I think just if we're talking about bombarding you with the same message about, like, I need a tie, give me a tie, you should be buying a tie, that's one thing. If the other message just is about Tide or McDonald's or Starbucks or State Farm, it's a different deal. It's how specific that message is to us as consumers that could turn us off.
I tend to think that a targeted ad is actually kind of not a comfort, but I like knowing that the ads that I'm seeing are relevant, because I tend to think that a more relevant ad is going to be more effective. But I think the complement to that statement is, you have, as a marketer at least, you have to make sure that you have the tools in your toolbox and the control to make sure that you're not taking advantage of that.
Let's get a little bit more into measurement. Kathleen, I hear a lot about the challenges of measuring cross-screen campaigns, of comparing one thing to another. Could you just kind of break that down to us in real terms? What does that mean? How does one view compare to another?
Yeah, I think we've already talked about one of the primary challenges, which is the frequency challenge. But in terms of measurement, and unique measurement is one thing that I'll point out. We did a series of studies with Nielsen where we were able to prove that over 40% of the audience that we were running with connected TV was unique, and in other words, they wouldn't have been able to be found on broadcast television. So that's one area of measurement where we've been really focused in order to help our agencies and the marketers that they represent understand what they're really getting from connected TV and the value that's there for them. But then the other thing that I would add, and again specific to connected TV, is complementing the traditional measurement of TV in terms of GRPs and CPMs with some of the newer digital metrics that you can take into account when you have full transparency into audience metrics and time of day and geolocation and completion rates. I think someone said earlier, just making sure that you have access to that full suite, because it really just depends on what the marketer, what outcome the marketer is looking for, and then it's our job to guide to help them understand how their media investment drove results and drove value.
Does the advertiser or the agency have different goals for unique reach and incremental reach?
Sometimes. I think it depends. Every campaign is different, but I think across the board we've seen a lot of interest in understanding what did I get for this. If I've traditionally been running in linear TV and now I'm pivoting to test out connected TV, what was the incrementality of that, and how much did I get that was truly unique, where I simply could not have reached that user had I been exclusively running in linear TV.
Before we totally run out of time, we should probably talk about programmatic a little bit. And maybe, Todd, you could tell us what that means, programmatic buying. I think probably still a lot of people don't know, and how people get into it.
And this is, I don't want to step on Kathleen's toes. This is really your wheelhouse here, but it's it's the automated buying and selling of inventory. I think what I would say about programmatic is the promise is fantastic. If you're telling me it's easier to transact on what a traditional buy was through technology channels, like we all are running towards that, embracing it. I think as it stands right now, different clients have different needs, and programmatic is doing a very good job of meeting those needs increasingly, quarter over quarter, year over year. Ultimately, there's still some pain points to it, but it's something that will benefit advertising and like a lot of the challenges we brought up in the long run with greater tools and greater controls.
I hear a lot about programmatic hitting either the top or bottom of the funnel, and I just nod and I pretend I know what the heck people are talking about. Is programmatic better at a certain type of appeal to people?
I think the promise of it ultimately is full funnel.
Full funnel,
Yeah.
which means,
Absolutely.
Branding down to performance.
And
Yeah.
I would
And
say the same for audience-based buying, which many would define differently than programmatic, which I agree with you, most would say is kind of automated programmatic. Audience-based buying, it's kind of the opposite of your standard age, gender demo. It's identifying what could be an entirely custom audience, perhaps even including an advertiser CRM to define it, and using that as the basis to create and execute an ad campaign. And I would agree that for that, it can be just as easily leveraged, audience-based buying can, for brand campaigns, super top funnel, just as it could a DR campaign to drive actual going to a certain website or visiting a certain app.
I'll just add on to that. The Trade Desk, I should have mentioned this before, I can't remember if I did or not, but the Trade Desk is 100% programmatic 100% of the time. I tend to think of programmatic advertising as data-driven advertising. So advertising that is informed by data. And I think that can be, as has been mentioned already, applicable to the very top of the funnel all the way down to the very bottom of the funnel.
there's a lot of stuff we could have talked about. You probably have some questions. We could take a few before we go. Does anyone have a question for us? Yes?
Right quick, I actually have two questions.
Okay.
Okay, the first question is there like a quote-unquote sweet spot for ad frequency or reach? Say, for example, like just for a regular, online digital ad, like per device, is there like, in other words, like how do you know you're going over too much to where you can potentially turn off a customer?
Hold it before we go on to the second. Okay, where are you from? What?
Where am I from?
Yeah. What company?
Oh, I'm from the American Psychological Association.
Okay. And who wants to take it? Is there a sweet spot for frequency and reach?
I'll just say I think it depends on the brand and where it's at in its life cycle. I think there are a lot of variables. I wish there was a simple answer to say there's a magic number. I think we all wish there was a magic number for it. If you're introducing a new product, you're going to want to be higher from a reach and frequency standpoint. If you're supporting an existing business, you have some more flexibility to be lower. So
I would
That's
just
a
quickly to say, measure it if at all possible, depending on what you're seeking to do, promote a brand, promote a purchase, whatever. It's totally going to depend on the campaign. So the more you can do to measure it real time and bucket by frequency, see how each bucket performs, that's always the best ways to test and learn.
Okay, and your second part?
What are some software tools or services you recommend for like budding startups, small businesses, or even small departments to help them track engagement across multiple devices? Because I get the impression that the Trade Desk does that, but for like a larger enterprise. So I'm asking this question more for like a small department or like a small startup.
Okay. Kathleen, do you have an answer?
I can speak from our perspective. We're a demand-side platform, so we're pretty much exclusively self-service, where you'd log into our platform and run campaigns, but pull reporting. And when I talked about reporting earlier and transparency around reporting and full funnel reporting, we provide all of that. So that's something that is table stakes for a platform like
Web
ours.
dashboard? A web dashboard, just log in and see what she's talking about? Harris or Todd, anything? Software?
I think it depends on what your goals are, but certainly some of the bigger platforms also, if you're doing a smaller campaign like Google or Facebook, they let you target reach. YouTube is just announced in terms of treating connected TV, and their largest growth segment is viewership on TV in terms of year-over-year growth. So, and you're able to target that now, so it really depends on what your goals are, the audience you're trying to reach.
Okay, we're going to end it there. I'm sorry, if you have questions, please come up and ask them afterwards. This is time. Thank you, everybody. Remember, coffee in the expo area, and thank you very much to our panelists.